Harrison Ford, you reveal in your book, after 40 years, is that right?
40 years I thought I'd wait.
Okay, so you reveal that you were having an affair with Harrison Ford.
I was.
You say it.
Before we judge Harrison Ford's marriage, we have to understand one thing about the man himself. For more than 5 decades, Hollywood has tried to define him. To millions, he is the fearless pilot of the Millennium Falcon. To others, he is the whip-cracking archaeologist who survived impossible adventures across the globe. Yet behind the legendary character stood someone remarkably different from the heroes he portrayed. A private man who rarely explained his emotions, avoided celebrity culture, and almost never discussed his family in public. That silence only fueled endless speculation. For decades, fans wondered what really happened behind closed doors. Why did 2 marriages end? What did Harrison Ford truly believe about love after fame transformed his life? And why, after all these years, does his current marriage appear stronger than anyone expected? Now, at 83, the answers don't come from scandal or sensational headlines. They come from a lifetime of experience, public interviews, and a philosophy about relationships that only became clear after decades of living. Long before the Oscars, billion-dollar franchises, and worldwide fame, Harrison Ford's life looked nothing like a Hollywood success story. Born in Chicago in 1942, he grew up in a middle-class family where celebrity wasn't even part of the conversation. He wasn't the loudest student, nor the most confident. Friends often described him as quiet, reserved, and independent. Acting wasn't a childhood dream. In fact, he stumbled into theater almost by accident while attending college, taking a drama class simply to overcome his fear of public speaking. Ironically, the course designed to help him speak confidently would eventually change the course of his entire life. When Ford moved to California in the mid-1960s, reality hit hard. Hollywood wasn't waiting for him. He landed small television appearances and forgettable film roles, but steady acting work remained elusive. Instead of glamorous premieres, his days were filled with construction sites, sawdust, and woodworking tools. He became an exceptionally skilled carpenter, building cabinets and furniture to support his growing family. While many struggling actors abandoned their dreams, Ford accepted the practical reality that acting alone couldn't pay the bills. He chose responsibility over fantasy. That responsibility centered on one person above everyone else, Mary Marquardt. Long before cameras followed Harrison Ford everywhere he went, Mary knew him simply as an ambitious young man trying to create a stable future. They married in 1964, years before Star Wars existed, and long before anyone imagined Harrison Ford would become one of cinema's biggest stars. Their relationship wasn't built around fame or fortune. It was built around ordinary life. They worried about rent, raised children, and navigated financial uncertainty together. Their first son, Benjamin, arrived in 1966, followed by Willard in 1969. During those years, Ford wasn't attending red carpets. He was installing cabinets during the day and auditioning whenever opportunities appeared. Many people who knew him then have recalled that he took enormous pride in providing for his family, even if that meant setting aside his own artistic ambitions. In many ways, carpentry became more than a profession. It became a symbol of the grounded, practical mindset that would define Harrison Ford throughout his life. Ironically, that very trade would place him in the right room, at exactly the right time. While working as a carpenter for clients connected to the entertainment industry, Ford crossed paths with influential filmmakers, including George Lucas. Lucas had already directed American Graffiti, where Ford had appeared briefly, but another project was beginning to take shape, a strange science fiction adventure few people believed would succeed. The script seemed unusual. The production looked risky. Even major studios questioned whether audiences would embrace a story about laser swords, robots, and space battles. Ford wasn't originally chasing the role of Han Solo. During casting sessions, he often helped Lucas by reading dialogue opposite auditioning actors. Yet something unexpected happened. His natural delivery transformed the character. Han Solo suddenly felt sarcastic, believable, and effortlessly charismatic. Without trying to impress anyone, Harrison Ford became impossible to ignore. Production on Star Wars was famously chaotic. Equipment malfunctioned. Schedules slipped behind. Harsh desert conditions in Tunisia challenged both cast and crew. Few involved believed they were creating cinematic history. For Ford, it was simply another acting job, one that he hoped might lead to more consistent work. When filming ended in 1976, he returned home to Mary and their children, still uncertain about his future. Then came May 1977. Almost overnight, everything changed. Star Wars became a cultural phenomenon unlike anything Hollywood had ever experienced. Movie theaters overflowed with audiences. Merchandise exploded across the globe. Children memorized every line. Han Solo wasn't just another fictional character anymore. He became one of the most recognizable faces in entertainment history. For Harrison Ford, however, the greatest challenge wasn't sudden wealth. It was the disappearance of ordinary life. Simple trips to restaurants became impossible. Airports transformed into crowds of excited fans. Every public appearance attracted cameras. Studios rushed to offer bigger projects, longer contracts, and larger paychecks. Opportunities most actors spent entire careers chasing suddenly arrived all at once. Success, however, often demands a price few people recognize until much later. Fame changes schedules. It changes priorities. It changes expectations. Most importantly, it changes relationships. Ford's workload expanded dramatically as Hollywood realized audiences wanted more of him. Interviews, promotional tours, international travel, and new film commitments consumed increasing amounts of time. The balance that once existed between family life and professional ambition gradually became more difficult to maintain. Like countless actors before him, he faced an impossible challenge. How do you remain fully present at home while simultaneously becoming one of the busiest movie stars on Earth? Public curiosity surrounding his private life intensified during these years, especially because Harrison Ford refused to discuss personal matters openly. Unlike many celebrities who embrace magazine interviews about marriage and family, Ford rarely invited cameras into his home. The less he revealed, the more people speculated. Then, decades later, one revelation from the Star Wars set reignited enormous interest in that chapter of his life. In 2016, Carrie Fisher published her memoir, The Princess Diarist, based partly on journals she had written while filming the original Star Wars. In those pages, she revealed that she and Ford had shared a brief relationship during production in 1976. Her account described an intense but short-lived connection during an unusual period when both actors were living far from home under extraordinary working conditions. The memoir immediately dominated entertainment headlines around the world. Many readers rushed to draw dramatic conclusions. Some assumed they had finally discovered the reason Harrison Ford's first marriage eventually ended, but the historical record tells a more complicated story. Ford himself never publicly described that relationship as a cause of his divorce from Mary Marquardt. In fact, he has consistently avoided turning that period into public drama. When asked about Fisher's memoir, his response remained remarkably restrained. He acknowledged that reading about such private memories years later felt unusual, but declined to revisit the details publicly. That reaction reflected something fans had seen throughout his career. Harrison Ford has almost always resisted explaining his personal life through emotional headlines. Looking back, it becomes clear that the late 1970s represented a period of enormous transformation on every level. His career accelerated beyond anything he could have imagined. The demands of worldwide fame grew heavier each year. At the same time, his family life was navigating pressures few couples ever experience. By 1979, Harrison Ford and Mary Marquardt's marriage came to an end. Unlike many celebrity divorces, there are no explosive public accusations, televised interviews, or bitter courtroom battles. Instead, both largely chose privacy. That decision will become another defining characteristic of Ford's approach to relationships. Even during painful transitions, he rarely sought public sympathy or attempted to control the media narrative. Years later, when people searched for one dramatic explanation behind the divorce, Ford never offered one. Instead, his actions suggested something different. Life, he seemed to believe, is rarely shaped by a single event. More often, it changes gradually through time, distance, responsibility, and circumstances that become impossible to ignore. That quiet philosophy would eventually shape the lessons Harrison Ford carried into the next chapter of his life, a chapter that would bring even greater professional success, another marriage, unexpected heartbreak, and ultimately the relationship many now believe became the strongest of them all. The end of Harrison Ford's first marriage marked more than the close of one chapter. It forced him to confront a reality that countless successful people eventually face. Achievement and happiness are not the same thing. A career can be thriving while personal relationships quietly struggle under the weight of constant absence, impossible schedules, and public attention. Ford never turned those difficult years into a media spectacle. Instead, he did what he had always done throughout his life. He moved forward without offering dramatic explanations. By the early 1980s, Hollywood saw Harrison Ford as something almost unprecedented. He wasn't simply the star of one blockbuster franchise. He had become the face of two of the biggest adventure series in movie history. In 1981, audiences met Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark, directed by Steven Spielberg and produced by George Lucas. Once again, Ford created a character who would become an international icon. Indiana Jones combined intelligence, courage, humor, and vulnerability in a way that captivated audiences across generations. Unlike many actors who struggled to escape a defining role, Harrison Ford had achieved something incredibly rare. He wasn't trapped by Han Solo. Instead, he expanded his legacy. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, films like Blade Runner, Witness, The Mosquito Coast, Working Girl, Presumed Innocent, Patriot Games, The Fugitive, Air Force One, and several Indiana Jones sequels confirmed that he wasn't simply a franchise actor. He was one of the most dependable leading men in Hollywood. Success, however, brought another opportunity for love. In 1983, Ford married screenwriter Melissa Mathison, whose career had reached extraordinary heights after writing Edie the Extraterrestrial. Their relationship appeared, from the outside, to represent a fresh beginning. Both understood the entertainment industry. Both appreciated the creative process. Together they built a family, welcoming two children, Malcolm and Georgia. For many years, they appeared to balance careers with family life remarkably well. But life inside Hollywood rarely follows a simple script. As Ford's career continued to soar, film productions required months away from home. International filming schedules became routine. Promotional tours stretched across continents. Every major release demanded interviews, premieres, and endless travel. Even someone as disciplined as Harrison Ford could not escape the reality that enormous professional success consumes enormous amounts of time. Unlike many celebrity couples, Ford and Mathison never invited the public into their private disagreements. There were no sensational television interviews or public accusations after their separation. Instead, they handled one of the most difficult periods of their lives with remarkable discretion. Their separation became public around 2000, and their divorce was finalized several years later. Again, Harrison Ford refused to explain every detail. That silence frustrated tabloids, but revealed something important about his character. He believed that not every deeply personal experience belonged to public entertainment. Years later, another heartbreaking event demonstrated the respect that still existed between them. In 2015, Melissa Mathison passed away following a battle with cancer. Although their marriage had ended years earlier, Ford honored her memory privately, reminding many observers that the end of marriage does not erase decades of shared history, family, and mutual respect. By this stage in his life, Harrison Ford had experienced extraordinary professional triumphs alongside profound personal challenges. Most people assumed they already knew his story. They were wrong, because a relationship that would ultimately redefine his understanding of marriage had not yet fully begun. The turning point arrived in 2002. At the Golden Globe Awards, Harrison Ford met actress Calista Flockhart, best known at the time for her starring role in Ally McBeal. Their age difference immediately became a topic of media discussion. Tabloids questioned whether the relationship would last. Critics predicted it was simply another Hollywood romance destined to disappear within months. Ford ignored the noise. Unlike earlier periods of his career, he no longer felt compelled to satisfy public expectations. Decades of fame had taught him that headlines come and go, but genuine relationships require something entirely different: patience, trust, and privacy. Their relationship developed slowly. There were no constant magazine covers documenting every dinner date, no carefully staged publicity campaigns. Instead, they built their connection away from cameras whenever possible. Friends who observed them often described an unusually relaxed partnership, one built less on Hollywood glamour than on shared humor and mutual respect. Perhaps that reflected Harrison Ford's own evolution. The young actor who once struggled to balance sudden fame with family responsibilities had become an older man with very different priorities. Career remained important. Family became essential. In 2009, Ford proposed. The following year, they married in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in a ceremony that reflected the quiet life they preferred. It was an extravagant Hollywood production designed for magazine exclusives. Instead, it was deeply personal. Another important moment followed after their marriage. Ford formally embraced his role as a father figure to Calista Flockhart's son, Liam. For someone who had already raised 4 biological children, becoming part of a blended family represented another meaningful chapter. Friends often noted how naturally Ford adapted to this role, suggesting that experience and maturity had given him a clearer understanding of what truly mattered. As the years passed, something interesting happened. The rumors faded. The predictions of failure disappeared. Instead, Harrison Ford and Calista Flockhart quietly became one of Hollywood's most enduring couples. So, what exactly is the truth Harrison Ford has finally revealed about marriage? The answer isn't found in one shocking confession. It's found across decades of interviews, public appearances, and the consistency of his actions. Ford has repeatedly emphasized that long-lasting relationships depend on respect rather than constant attention from the outside world. He has joked in interviews that one important lesson is simple. Sometimes it's wise to nod your head instead of trying to win every argument. Delivered with his trademark dry humor, the comment reflected a deeper point about compromise and mutual understanding. He has also spoken about the importance of giving each partner room to pursue their own interests while remaining committed to one another. Unlike many celebrity couples who define success through public visibility, Ford and Flockhart have largely measured theirs through privacy. Perhaps that is why their marriage has endured. It has never relied on public approval. Throughout his 80s, Harrison Ford has continued working with extraordinary energy. Whether returning as Indiana Jones, appearing in acclaimed television dramas, or speaking about aviation, another lifelong passion. He seems noticeably different from a man who first entered Hollywood decades earlier. There is greater perspective, greater patience, and perhaps greater gratitude. Looking back across his life, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. His first marriage was built before fame. His second unfolded during the height of international superstardom. His third emerged after he had already experienced both remarkable success and painful loss. Each relationship belonged to a different version of Harrison Ford. Maybe that is the real truth. People often search for one dramatic revelation capable of explaining an entire life. Reality is rarely that simple. Harrison Ford has never claimed perfection. He has never portrayed himself as someone who always made the right decisions. Instead, his story reflects something much more human. People grow. Priorities change. Experience teaches lessons success alone never can. At 83, Harrison Ford appears less interested in defending the past and appreciating the present, rather than revisiting old controversies or assigning blame for relationships that ended decades ago. He seems content allowing history to remain history, while focusing on the life he continues to build. In many ways, that may be the most meaningful confession of all, not spoken through dramatic headlines, but demonstrated through quiet consistency. The young carpenter who once worried about paying bills became one of the greatest movie stars in cinematic history. The actor who spent years avoiding celebrity eventually learned that fame is temporary, while family is lasting. The man once defined by Han Solo and Indiana Jones ultimately discovered that the greatest adventure wasn't found on a movie set. It was learning through trial, loss, success, and time what it truly means to build a life with someone you love. And perhaps that is why Harrison Ford's story continues to resonate with millions around the world. Not because it is perfect, but because beneath the legendary characters and unforgettable performances, it reminds us that even icons spend a lifetime learning the same lessons about love, commitment, forgiveness, and happiness that the rest of us do.